Look into my eyes, friend. Let the power of my soothing voice empower you to click on the subscribe button. Did it work? My subscriber count's not going up. Don't tell me I failed my power check again. Alright, here's my last PSP. And I'm all out, so I'm gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way. Hey everybody, my name is D from D&D Ditches, and today the D stands for Deceptively Subliminal Suggestion. Hint hint. I just read the Complete Psionics Handbook for AD&D 2nd edition, and I want to talk about it today. I love psionics. If real life was a game of Dungeons & Dragons, I would be a psionicist for sure. I spend a lot of time in my head. I used to read X-Men comics when I was a kid, and most D&D tables want me to stay as far away as possible. See, we have a lot in common. I want to create this series called So You Think You Can Psionic as we look through different iterations of psionics throughout the editions. I hope the twos of you who are psionic positive will hang around. Psionics is essentially psychic powers. It is thematically a different power source to magic, as magic is powered from external sources to shape, control, and harness energies of the multiverse. A psionicist looks inward, drawing the power derived from their body, mind, and spirit through their nexus and projecting this power outwards. Most players do not think psionics belong in D&D, as it did not have its origins in fantasy and it's more sci-fi flavored, which is fair. For me though, I think fantasy has few limits. Mind flayers are all the rage these days. Was anyone complaining about the mind flayer powers in Baldur's Gate 3? And think about this. Mind flayers are psionic creatures that already exist in D&D. Is it too much of a stretch to think that a player character could have access to the same powers? Before we dive into the book, I just want to introduce the vocabulary to anybody who might not be familiar with psionics. Psionics is a noun, which refers to psychic powers. For example, magic doesn't work, let's try psionics. Psionic is an adjective, which describes something as powered by psionics. For example, psionic items or psionic powers. Psionicist is a noun, which refers to the user of psionics. In later editions, they're also referred to as a psion. And now let's get started with the book. First step is everybody's favorite part, character creation. Now let's make a character using 2nd edition rules. As the psionicist has minimum stats requirements, I prefer to use method 5 as stated in the player's handbook, which is 4d6 drop the lowest, rolled 6 times. So let's give it a go. 6, 6, 3, drop the 3, which is 15. 3, 5, 1, drop the 1, which is 9. 3, 5, 4, drop the 1, which is 12. 2, 3, 5, drop the 1, which is 10. 6, 3, 3, drop the 2, which gives us 12. And finally, 6, 3, 3, drop the 1, which gives us 12. In order to qualify as a psionicist, the minimum ability requirement is a constitution of 11, intelligence of 12, and wisdom of 15. As method 5 lets us arrange the scores in any order we like, we're going to have to put the 15 in wisdom, 12 in intelligence and constitution. As you can see, we barely just met the minimum requirement. Going to slot 12 in dexterity, 10 in strength, and a charisma of 9. The prime requisites for the psionicist are constitution and wisdom. In this case, neither of them are 16 or higher, which means that we would not be eligible for an experience bonus. And it's not high enough for us to dual class in or out of psionicist either. As dual classing is not an option, that's taken away one of the advantages of playing a human. So in this case, I'm actually going to go with a dwarf. All of the standard non-human races are eligible to become psionicists. And multi-classing is also available with fighter or thief. But for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to go with a single class psionicist. And by going with a dwarf, we get a constitution bonus with a charisma penalty. And that takes our constitution to 13 and charisma down to 8, as we're trying to optimize our build for the psionicist. Let's give him a name. How about Ronnie Silversword of the Silver Sword clan. As for racial level limits, dwarves can advance to up to maximum of the 8th level. And as for alignment, the psionicist can be any alignment that is not chaotic. So we are going with lawful neutral. And as for hit points, Psionicists get a D6. Most of the 2nd edition players I know have a house rule where they have maximum hit points for level 1. Now let's talk about PSP. PSP in this instance stands for Psionic Strength Points, and that's essentially the mana system that the Psionicist uses. Instead of advancing spell slots like the wizards and the priests, the Psionicist uses a point system. To calculate the PSP, we look at the starting Constitution, Intelligence, and Wisdom. These 3 ability scores are chosen because it represents the condition of the Psionicist's body, mind, and spirit, which he uses to draw his power from. Now you're probably thinking intelligence and wisdom make sense, but why Constitution? It is said that psionic powers place tremendous physical strain on the psionicist, and the act of projecting psychic energy out of one's body is particularly draining. So the psionicist must keep their health and fitness at tip-top levels to maintain their power. Now to determine Ronnie's PSP, we look to his wisdom score. As the wisdom score determines his base PSP, you should generally always put your highest ability in wisdom. A starting wisdom of 15 will give him 20 PSP. Next, we look at the Constitution Intelligence, as they can give us some bonus points if they are at 16 or above, and in this case, they are not. And given that a wisdom of 15 is the absolute minimum that you need, we are unfortunately starting the game with the minimum PSP of 20. Now 20 is our maximum mana pool. Unlike the other spellcasters, Psionicist does not need to sleep in order to recover them. Light activities like walking and riding restores 3 PSP per hour, while sitting, resting, or reading restores 6 points per hour. Sleeping and meditating restores 12 points per hour, so a full night's sleep will top Ronnie up to the maximum. And he can use his powers during the day and still being able to restore some points while doing light activities such as traveling. So there are multiple opportunities to restore your points during an adventure day. In terms of fighting ability, the Psionicist Thaco improves every 2 levels, placing them at the same level as rogues. In terms of equipment, they're also similar to rogues. For weapons, they can use the short bow, hand and light crossbows, dagger, dirk, knife, club, hand axe, throwing axe, horseman's mace and pick, scimitar, spear, short sword, and warhammer. As for armor, they can use padded or studded leather or hide. They start with 2 weapon proficiencies, so we're going to pick short sword and short bow. And they start with 3 non-weapon proficiencies, but since that's an optional rule, I won't go into it for this video. Now to pick Ronnie's powers. Table 4 is the Psionic power progression. Psionic powers are divided into 6 total disciplines. The Psionicist will pick a single discipline to start with at level 1, and this will be considered their primary discipline. And as they advance to a higher level, they're able to pick up other disciplines. Now, psionic powers are also divided into sciences and devotions. A science refers to a major psionic power, while a devotion refers to a minor psionic power. And a psionicist must know 2 devotions for every science that they wish to learn per discipline. So at first level, we get to pick our primary discipline, 1 science, and 3 devotions from that discipline. And we also learn 1 defense mode. Now let's have a look at the different disciplines. There are 6 psionic disciplines. Similar to the schools of magic, each discipline has its own unique flavor and identity, and generally has a preference over which of the user's ability score to draw power from.
First up is clairsentience. Clairsentient powers lets you gain knowledge beyond the conventional human senses. It contains powers like danger sense, conversion of senses like feel light or see sound, see across vast distances with clairvoyance, precognition, and detect psychic impressions left on a location or item. Psychokinesis. Psychokinetic powers let you move matters and energy across space, like lifting objects or yourself with telekinesis or levitate, control energies like light, sound, and fire, animate objects or shadows, rearrange molecules, or even destroy them with disintegrate. Psychometabolism. Psychometabolic powers let you enhance or transform your body and its extensions. It contains powers like altering or seizing bodily functions, enhance ability scores, metamorphosis of one's body, and cure diseases. Psychoportation. Psychoportive powers lets one move from one location to another without crossing space. Its powers are teleportation of various styles for either yourself or someone else, travel to the astral plane, and even some time manipulation. Telepathy. Telepathic powers let you make contact with another mind. Once contact is made, the user can read another's mind, elicit various emotions, mind wipe, mind switch, and various forms of telepathic attacks. Telepathy is also the most complex discipline, with various ifs and buts to establish contact, as well as a whole separate psionic combat system with attack and defense modes. Just thinking about it gives me a headache. It's going to get its own section later in this video. The sixth discipline is Psionics, and it works a little differently to the other disciplines. It includes auxiliary powers used to enhance or alter another power, as well as advanced powers which are gated by the psionicist level and other prerequisites. In future editions, this discipline will cease to exist with its powers divided into other disciplines, and the auxiliary powers being adapted into psionic feats similar to metamagic.
Now that I've given you a taste of what it can do, let's talk about the mechanics of 2E psionics. For this example, I'll be using the devotion biofeedback from psychometabolism, which reduces each incoming physical attack damage by 2 and improves AC by 1. Initial cost is how much PSP it takes to activate the power, and each subsequent round has a maintenance cost, or you can choose to drop the power at any time. So in this example, it takes 6 PSP to activate, and each subsequent round costs 3 PSP to maintain. Bear in mind that in 2E, each round is a minute, so outside of combat, you're getting pretty good mileage. To activate a psionic power, one must succeed on a power check, as indicated by the power score, which shows an ability score with a modifier. The psionicist must roll equal to or under the power score plus modifier on a d20 to succeed on a power check. The power score for biofeedback is Constitution minus 2. Ronnie has a Constitution of 13, minus 2 is 11. Therefore, Ronnie needs to roll 11 or under on a d20, which is equivalent to 55% chance to successfully activate biofeedback. If Ronnie fails the power check, the power does not activate. He expends half the PSP required to activate the power, and in this case, 3 PSP, and uses up his turn. The power check has an additional optional quirk with critical success and failure. If you roll your power score, and for Ronnie it's an 11, then the power is enhanced. And as described, your AC is improved by 3 instead of 1, as 2E uses descending armor class. However, if you roll a natural 20, then it's a critical fail, and in this case, excessive blood loss will cause 10% loss to your hit points. But wait, there's more. If you roll a natural 1, then it's a success at a cost for the DM to determine, and in this case, I might rule that the psionicist will be fatigued for an hour afterwards with a -1 penalty to all dice rolls. This is one of the reasons why psionics wasn't so popular back in the day. A wizard or a cleric does not need to succeed on a skill check in order to cast a spell, and on top of that, some powers also give the opponent a saving throw, which makes psionics a bit unreliable. But on the other hand, it's very distinct and unique from magic. They can recover their mana pool during an adventure day without sleeping, and they can access similar powers to the casters, but much earlier. We'll have a look at some of these later on in the video. Playing a psionicist is significantly more rewarding with high ability scores, as well as making smarter choices by picking powers which utilize your highest attribute. If we have a character with 18 Constitution, then their power score for biofeedback would be 16, or 80% success rate. Then we can pick up a couple of +1s here and there, and it jumps to 90%, and it's starting to look a lot more reasonable. So biofeedback's pretty cool, right? Could you imagine a fighter decked out in full plate armor while getting AC bonus and damage reduction? Are psionic powers exclusive to the psionicist class? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about wild talents. The answer to that question is, while the psionicist is the master of psionic powers, everybody possesses psionic potential. At various points of the campaign, a DM might call for a wild talent check for any player character of any class. Every character has a base 1% chance of possessing wild talent, with additional modifiers shown on the table applied for exceptional constitution, intelligence, and wisdom scores. However, penalties are given to mages, clerics, and non-humans. For wizards and clerics, it's because magic has enabled them to rely on an external source of power, and psionics is a bit of a paradigm shift. And as for non-humans, but as the DM can call for multiple wild talent checks in the campaign, higher levels will also grant a bonus.
Okay, so arbitrary example. Under ideal circumstances, a level 1 human fighter with 18 in Constitution, Intelligence, and Wisdom will have a +9 bonus from attributes, on top of 1% base chance for a total of 10% chance of possessing wild talent. This is determined by rolling 10 or under on percentile die. But if you have those godly stats, just play a psionicist. Most average characters will have between 1 to 5% odds, but if you succeed, that means your character has unlocked their latent psionic talents. You will then roll again on a d100 to determine which psionic power your character has unlocked. Most characters will receive a single power, however, if you're extremely lucky, you could get 5, 6, 7, or more due to exploding dice mechanics. Plus, if the power has a prerequisite, you will get them for free too.
A character possessing wild talent will begin with enough PSP to use every power they know once. Plus, if a power can be maintained, they will also receive enough extra PSP to be able to maintain those powers for 4 extra rounds.
Let's say I succeed on the Psionic wild talent roll, and then on the Psionic devotion roll I get a 91, which means I've upgraded from the Psionic devotion table meaning minor powers to the Psionic science table meaning major powers. I then roll a 96, which is any science and 2 devotions of my choice. And like any sane 2nd edition player, I'm picking Disintegrate from Psychokinesis as my science. Then as my 2 devotions, I'm picking Invisibility from Telepathy and Time Shift from Psychoportation. Then we look at the prerequisites. Disintegrate has the Telekinesis science and the Softened devotion as prereqs, so we get them too. Invisibility, despite being a devotion, has the science Mind Link as a prerequisite, as well as the devotion Contact. And then the devotion Time Shift gives us Teleport, also a science, as a bonus. So my already amazing wild talent roll of 1 science and 2 devotions actually turned into 4 sciences and 4 devotions. I didn't mean to power game, but I did anyway. Now let's look at our starting PSP. 40 for Disintegrate, 3 for Telekinesis plus 4 rounds of maintenance of 1 each for a total of 7, 4 for Soften plus 4 rounds of 3, total of 16. Invisibility's initial cost is Contact, which is a quirk of Telepathy, so we only get PSP for maintenance, which is 4 rounds of 2, a total of 8. Contact's initial cost is dependent on the level of the target, so minimum is 3 plus 4 rounds of 1, total of 7. Mindlink's initial cost is also Contact, but it costs 8 PSP per round to maintain, so a total is 32. Time Shift is a one-off power costing 16, and finally Teleport's minimum cost is 16, so we get that as well. Add it all up, and our wild talent initial PSP is 136 at level 1. It's absolutely bonkers.
Poor Ronnie only started with 20, but how does he expand his PSP pool? Thankfully, each time a psionicist levels up, their PSP maximum is increased by 10 plus modifier for exceptional wisdom on table 5. Exceptional constitution and intelligence helps with initial PSP, but wisdom is the main contributor, which is another reason why you should put your highest score in wisdom. Characters with wild talents will gain 4 PSP per level with no bonus for modifiers. Ronnie with his initial PSP of 20 will receive a 10-point increase to his PSP pool at each level up. And he'll finally be able to overtake our busted wild talent character at... Actually, he doesn't until level 21. This is 2nd edition. Anyway, let's finally talk about telepathy. The power forms a telepathic connection with another sentient mind. You can think of it like a hacker tapping into your network. If I was more popular, this would be the part of the video where I try to sell you a VPN subscription, but since I'm a D-list nobody, you're welcome. Contact does nothing on its own. It merely makes it possible for you to use your other telepathic powers on the target. Non-psionic minds are considered open. This means that they have no defenses against contact. The best a target can do is to bombard their mind with mental noises like repeating a nursery rhyme ad nauseum. Psionicists and psionic creatures' minds are closed. Contact with them can only be made if they consent to it. Otherwise, the only way for an intruder to make contact is via psionic combat, and this is where the fuckery begins. There are 5 psionic attack modes and 5 psionic defense modes. The attack modes are Mind Thrust, Ego Whip, Id Insinuation, Psychic Crush, and Psionic Blast. They are telepathy powers which inflict various ailments to a contact target, but are also used to breach psionic defenses. The defense modes are Mind Blank, Thought Shield, Mental Barrier, Intellect Fortress, and Tower of Iron Will. Defense modes are learned as the psionicist levels up. With how combat works in 2nd edition, actions are determined prior to initiative being rolled. Defense modes must be activated at the beginning of the round to be effective, with PSP paid regardless if defenses are used that round. The only exception is Mind Blank, which costs no PSP and can be used for defense even if you do not activate a defense mode at the beginning of the round. Using defense modes are not considered an action. A psionicist can prepare another action as normal, whether it be attack, casting a spell, or using another power. When an attacker uses an attack mode against a defender with the defense mode, psionic combat begins. Table 14 shows the modifiers applied to the attacker's power score, as different defenses are more effective against certain attacks. I recommend reading the Prism Pentad novels by Troy Denning for the Dark Sun setting to get some inspiration on how to narrate the psionic combat in an imaginative and inspired manner. In the novels, when the psionicist Argus Asicles used contact, he implanted a subliminal thought in his victim's mind, disguising it as their own thought. The idea being the target needs to believe the stray thought is their own. Subtlety is the key. Miscalculate and the target may detect your presence in their head. For example, there was a scene in the book where Argus entered the mind of his former childhood friend Tithian and disguised it in the form of a shared memory of when they were kids, leveraging on the feeling of nostalgia so Tithian would let his guard down. Psionic combat is depicted as a war of make-believe taking place in the mindscape. The attacks and defenses are often manifested as forces of nature or creatures as a metaphor for this cerebral conflict. The attacker could lead with summoning gale force winds while the defender erects a lush forest as windbreakers. Then the wind turns into a raging inferno to devour the forest, while the defender transforms into an eagle to escape the fire. Playing out your psionic attacks and defenses in such a way could be a fun and creative way to spice up combat, making it feel really epic and evocative. After all, you're only limited by your imagination. Now, here's the nitty-gritty. All attack modes can be used twice per round for the same PSP cost. The attacker and defender both roll for power checks, and the higher roll that does not exceed their power score wins the conflict, with the defender winning any ties. Rolling over one's power score means a fail on the power check. When the attacker wins the psychic contest, they make a partial contact called a tangent, and 3 tangents will establish full contact. While full contact can be maintained with multiple targets, tangents can only be held with a single target at a time. A cost of 1 PSP per round is required to maintain tangent. Bear in mind though, anybody with wild talent does not automatically gain a defense mode, so their mind is as open as anyone without psionic powers. So I know that was a lot, so let's go through a live psionic combat demonstration. Before we start battle, we're actually going to level Ronnie up. To give him more options, we're going to level him up to 5th level, which is going to give him 3 sciences, 10 devotions across 2 disciplines with 3 defense modes. So we're going to pick his attack modes and defense modes. First of all, Mind Thrust, Ego Whip, and Id Insinuation. We write down the power scores as well as the PSP cost. We move on to defense modes. He's going to pick Mind Blank, Mental Barrier, and Intellect Fortress. All 3 attack modes that we picked are devotions, and since we get 10 of those, we still have 7 devotions and 3 sciences. And fill out our other powers. We're taking Contact as is a prerequisite, as well as Mind Link, which is a science. We're taking Probe, which is also a science, which requires ESP to be taken as a prerequisite. And then we're taking Aversion, which compels someone to withdraw, Invisibility, and the power Truth Air, which detects lies. So we have 2 devotions and 1 science remaining. And Ronnie's going to dip into the Psychoportation discipline and take Dimension Door and Dream Travel. Bear in mind, for each science that we wish to learn, we need to know at least 2 devotions within the same discipline. Now that we have taken 2 devotions, we can now take the science Teleport. And by going from 1st to 5th level, that's 4 level ups, each time Ronnie will gain 10 additional PSP, which makes his maximum PSP 60. Ronnie then encounters a Gith and a fight breaks out. I'm using this monster from the Dark Sun setting because they naturally have psionic powers. Let's rearrange the book so that I've got a bit more room. We've got the attack versus defense modifiers table open, as we'll be needing that for combat. We have the monster stat blocks, and I'll put Ronnie's stats on the top left corner and Ronnie's psionic powers just below. And I've got a scrap piece of paper for record keeping. On the left we have Gith and we have Ronnie on the right side. Ronnie has 60 PSP, and the Gith starts with 80. For this exercise, I'm going to use the yellow dice to represent the Gith and the red dice to represent Ronnie. In 2nd edition combat, all participants must choose their action at the beginning of the round prior to initiative is rolled. The Gith is using Id Insinuation as its attack mode, and Tower of Iron Will as its defense mode. Meanwhile, Ronnie will use Mind Thrust as an attack mode. As this is the first time that Ronnie's encountered the Gith, he does not recognize the Gith as a psionic creature, so therefore, he chose not to activate a psionic defense. 2nd edition monster stat blocks will include any psionic powers if the monster has access to them, including attack and defense modes separated by a slash. It will also provide a number to use for its base power score. In the Gith's case, it's 16. 2E initiative is rolled on a d10 and is rolled at the beginning of each round. There's also an optional rule where you can add the weapons, magic, and powers speed modifier to the initiative. But for the purpose of this exercise, we're not going to use that rule just to keep combat moving. Lowest number goes first,
In this case, the Gith has rolled a 2 and Ronnie has rolled a 7. So Gith will go first. And he's attacking with It Insinuation. What we need to do now is determine his power score. His base power score is 16. The power score for It Insinuation is Wisdom -4. We're using 16 as a base, -4 gives us 12. Ronnie does not have a defense mode active. However, as he knows the defense mode Mind Blank, he can instinctively activate this power when he's under psionic attack. So therefore in this case, Mind Blank will activate. And that's why it's generally recommended that you take Mind Blank as your first defense mode. Then we need to look at the attack versus defense modifiers. It Insinuation versus Mind Blank has a -3 modifier to attack. So the attacker's power score, which was 12, has now been reduced to 9. And for Ronnie's Mind Blank, it has a power score of Wisdom -7. Ronnie's Wisdom is 15. -7 gives him a power score of 8. And now we roll. So both the attacker and the defender rolls an 8. We now need to compare the number rolled against their power score. If the number rolled is less than or equal to the power score, the power succeeds. If the number rolled is above their power score, then the power fails activate. The idea with this contested roll is whoever gets a higher number without going above their power score will win the bout. When there is a tie, the defender will win. The attacker needs to exceed the defender's roll. So Ronnie wins this bout. There is another quirk when it comes to being the defender. When you roll a number that you like, you can keep it for the rest of that round. As Ronnie rolled an 8, which is his defense power score, meaning this is literally the highest he can roll and still succeed on the defense. And as we know that psionic attacks takes place twice a round, he will be expecting another attack, so he's going to keep the 8 for the next attack, while the Gith is getting a second attack. In 2nd edition, all subsequent attacks happen after everyone else has already taken their action, so the Gith can only make his second attack after Ronnie has made his first attack. So now it's Ronnie's turn to attack. He's using Mind Thrust against Tower of Iron Will. Mind Thrust's power score is Wisdom -2, 15 -2 is 13. And then we check the modifier, Mind Thrust versus Tower of Iron Will is an additional -5. So his 13 becomes an 8. As for the defender, the power score for Tower of Iron Will is Wisdom -2, and 16 -2 is 14. In this case, Gith the defender rolls a natural 20. A natural 20 is always a critical fail. He does not succeed on his defense. However, Ronnie rolls a 12, which exceeds his power score, so his attack also fails. No one won this bout, they just stare awkwardly at each other for a few seconds. Now the Gith is making his second attack. Remember, Ronnie's keeping his 8 from earlier. The Gith rolls a 6 and fails to overcome Ronnie's 8. And now comes Ronnie's second attack versus the Gith. Ronnie rolls a 5 on the attack, and the Gith rolls a 2 on the defense. Ronnie's attack roll beats the Gith's defense roll and wins this bout, and he succeeds with establishing one tangent. Round 1 ends with Ronnie establishing a single tangent on the Gith. Now we also need to deduct PSP costs for the round. If we go by the rules, this should really be deducted at the start, but they both have plenty of PSP, so you do what works for you. The Gith spends 5 points on It Insinuation and 6 points on Tower of Iron Will, so that's 11 points in total and left with 69. For Ronnie, Mind Blank is free, and Mind Thrust is 2 PSP, so he only spent 2 points this round, leaving him with 58. For round 2, the Gith, upon seeing how effective Mind Thrust was, has switched his attack mode over to Mind Thrust, as that's one of the powers that he does know. And he's switching over to Mental Barrier as his defense, while Ronnie's going to use Ego Whip as his attack and Mental Barrier as his defense. Now, I really should be doing the right thing and deduct the PSP at the start of the round. So for Ronnie, Ego Whip is 4 and Mental Barrier is 3, for a total of 7 points, leaving him with 51. As for the Gith, Mental Barrier is 3 and Mind Thrust is 2, 5 points in total, leaving him with 64. Gith is a 5 and Ronnie is a 10. So Gith gets to move first once again. Mind Thrust power score is Wisdom -2, and Mind Thrust versus Mental Barrier is an additional -4, giving the Gith a power score of 10. And for Ronnie, Mental Barrier's power score is Wisdom -2, 15 -2 is 13. Now I forgot to mention at the start of this fight, Ronnie had no psychic defenses. Now for a psionicist that does not know Mind Blank, and chose not to use a defense mode at the start of the round, they would have no psionic defenses for that round. If the attacker succeeds on their power check, the attacker would automatically gain a tangent per each successful psionic attack. without giving the defender a chance to defend for itself. The other option would be, provided that Ronnie hasn't taken his action, drop his entire action that round to activate a defense mode that he does know. Hence, Mind Blank is useful as an insurance against unexpected psionic attacks. I'm telling you, this is why you need to pick Mind Blank. Now let's proceed to the Gith's attack, Mind Thrust versus Mental Barrier. Attacker rolls an 18. Here's a trick to make psionic combat go a little bit faster. Whenever the attacker fails the activation on his attack, it's an automatic win for the defender. Now it's Ronnie's turn to attack. Ego Whip is Wisdom -3. 15 minus 3 is 12. Ego Whip versus Mental Barrier is an additional -3, bringing his 12 to a 9. Mental Barrier is Wisdom -2, which makes it a 14. Once again, the attacker fails the power check, so the defender wins by default. Gets second attack. The attacker's 10 beats the defender's 8, so the attacker wins this bout and gains a tangent. Now for Ronnie's second attack. He succeeds on a 9, and Ronnie gains a second tangent. After round 2, Ronnie is on 2 tangents, and the Gith is on 1. And now for round 3. Ronnie has decided to use his most costly attack and defenses, so we're using Id Insinuation and Intellect Fortress, while the Gith is retaining the Mind Thrust and Mental Barrier combo. This goes to show that you do not need to change your attack or defense mode each round. Now for PSP cost, something that I forgot for round 2 was that maintaining a tangent cost 1 PSP. As Ronnie was able to establish a tangent for round 1, it would have costed him 1 PSP during round 2 to maintain that tangent. He would have been on 50 instead of 51. As for round 3, for the Gith, Mind Thrust and Mental Barrier is 5 points plus the 1 point for tangent, meaning it cost him 6 points in total, bringing him to 58. Id Insinuation costs 5, Intellect Fortress costs 4, plus 1 PSP for maintaining 2 tangents. It doesn't matter if you have 1 or 2 tangents, it still only costs 1 PSP. So in total, it cost him 10 PSP this round, taking him down to 40. Gith once again gets to go first. As the Gith is using the same power, defense power score is the same. However, we need to recalculate the attack because the defender has switched from Mental Barrier to Intellect Fortress. Mind Thrust power score is -2, and then Mind Thrust versus Intellect Fortress is also a -4. In this case, the power score remains the same, but it could have actually been different. And as for Ronnie, Intellect Fortress is Wisdom -3, has a power score of 12. And we might as well just do his attack. Id Insinuation is Wisdom -4. Id Insinuation versus Mental Barrier is a +4, which takes his power score back up to 15. First up is the Gith's attack. Attacker rolls a 7 and beats the defender's 1. The Gith secures his second tangent. And now for Ronnie's turn. He rolls a 15 versus the defender's 13. In this case, Ronnie wins the bout. As Ronnie was able to gain his third tangent, this is now full contact. However, it's specified in the rules, once you establish contact, that will be the end of your turn, even though attack modes can attack twice. So he will lose out on his second attack. And now for the Gith's second attack. The Gith rolls a 5 and was not able to penetrate Ronnie's Intellect Fortress, so at the end of third round, the Gith has established 2 tangents and Ronnie has secured contact on the Gith. Now moving into our fourth round, the Gith is going to use its Insinuation and Tower of Iron Will. Ronnie's going to keep up Intellect Fortress, and as Ronnie now has full contact, he's now able to use the Telepathy Devotion power called Aversion. Now we need to check that both sides have enough PSP to do what they want. The Gith's attack and defense combo is 11 points plus 1 point for maintaining the tangent, makes it a 12, taking his PSP down to 46. And in the last round, Ronnie was able to establish full contact. And the cost for contact is 3 PSP for a target that is between 1 and 5 hit dice. It will cost him 3 points for contact and 4 points for the Intellect Fortress. And Aversion's upfront cost is contact, which has already been established. He does not need to pay maintenance for tangent because he shifted from tangent to contact and he's paying the upfront cost for contact. So 7 point cost, taking him down to 33. Now for initiative. Ronnie finally manages to win initiative. He's going to use the telepathy power Aversion through the contact that he made with the Gith. The power score for Aversion is Wisdom -4, so in his case, it's 15 minus 4 equals 11. And because Aversion is not an attack mode, it's not subject to the modifiers in this table. So his power score is 11 and he manages to roll an 11. Something special happens if you roll either a natural 20 or you roll your power score. So the power for Aversion says, the victim with this power gains an aversion to a particular person, place, action, or event. They'll do everything they can to avoid the object of this aversion and not approach within 20 yards. On a regular success, what would happen is that the Gith would withdraw or maybe even run away. However, as Ronnie rolled his power score, this is a critical success, so the object of aversion affects the victim like a fear spell. Now for the entire duration where this power is activated, the Gith will be affected by a fear spell. Note that there is no saving throw for this power, and there are quite a few telepathy powers that have no saving throws. You might think that that's a bit overpowered, but bear in mind, the psionicist must successfully activate that power, and the power score of 11 only has a 55% success rate. Having no saving throws is balanced by the fact that there is a power check involved. And in this case, rolling a 20 has no additional effect, apart from the fact that the power fails to activate. And I just saw here for Tower of Iron Will, when rolling a 20, the psionicist is lost inside himself and cannot engage in psionic activities for 1d4 hours. So the Gith's first defense rolled a 20 on Tower of Iron Will, so he would have had no psionic defenses at this point, but for the purpose of this exercise, I wanted to keep going to show you how the psionic combat flows. So what's going to happen now? Ronnie used aversion on the Gith, rolled a critical success, now the poor Gith is running for his dear life, and the maintenance cost for this power is 8 per turn, taking Ronnie's PSP down to 25. Now in 2nd edition, 1 turn is 10 rounds. And because 1 round is a minute, 1 turn is 10 minutes. So for the full 10-minute duration, this Gith is affected by fear and cannot approach the object of his aversion. Ronnie set that as himself so that the Gith will run away from Ronnie. Ronnie can also extend the duration of this power by keep paying the maintenance cost of 8 per turn. And with his current PSP pool of 25, he's able to maintain it for another 30 minutes or so, and he can use that time to make his escape. The power will automatically drop when the psionicist is no longer able to pay the maintenance cost. And as PSP does not regenerate while you're using a psionic power, pretty much all psionic powers drop sooner or later. And that concludes our psionic battle simulation.
Wow, wasn't that fun? Look, it'll just take a little bit of practice, and I promise it'll become second nature. If you can Thaco, you can do psionic combat. And for what it's worth, I think it's easier than 3.5 grappling rules. Now that we understand psionics, just what was the general consensus with this book back in the day? Dark Sun was a popular setting which seamlessly incorporated psionics, and this book was mandatory to run a Dark Sun game. Outside of that setting though, most people didn't bother. As for players who did play with psionics back in 2nd edition, their opinions are generally divided into they're terrible and useless, or they're overpowered as hell. Underpowered or overpowered, which is it? Well, a little bit of both actually. Let's take a look at the strengths first of all. Let's compare with the other 2nd edition classes to see what kind of shenanigans you can get up to with psionics.
The most obvious example is Disintegrate. Outside of insanely lucky wild talent rolls, how early can we take it as a psionicist? At level 1 we need to pick the Psychokinesis discipline, 3 devotions including Soften, and the Science Telekinesis. At level 2 we pick up 2 more devotions. At level 3 we can finally pick Disintegrate, provided we have a minimum of 4 psychokinetic devotions. It costs 40 PSP to use, so even a terrible psionicist like Ronnie has 40 PSP at level 3. Disintegrate is a 6th level wizard spell which requires the wizard to be level 12 in order to learn. The psionicist can get it at level 3. And due to classes in 2E requiring different amount of experience to level up, psionicist will be level 3 at 4400 XP, while the wizard requires 5000 XP to get to level 3. So putting this in perspective, a psionicist can use Disintegrate when a wizard can't even cast 2nd level spells. Let that sink in for a bit.
Although there's one other little quirk that we need to be aware of.
Power score of Disintegrate is Wisdom -4. A psionicist with 18 Wisdom need to roll 14 or under, or 70% success rate. But if they roll a natural 20, the power backfires and the psionicist will need to save against death, but with a +5 bonus, or be disintegrated themselves. A level 3 psionicist death saving throw is 13 with +5 bonus. The psionicist must succeed at rolling 8 or above, that is a 35% chance of death.
I've just done the math. You have a 1.75% chance of killing yourself every time you use Disintegrate, although the odds diminishes as you level up. But it's still better odds than Wild Magic.
Obviously, Disintegrate is an extreme example of a front-load ability, but what other cool things can they do earlier? Telekinesis, a devotion available at level 1, is a 5th level wizard spell. Teleport, a science available at level 1, is also a 5th level wizard spell. Astral Projection, a devotion available at level 1, is equivalent to Astral Spell, which is a 9th level wizard spell and a 7th level priest spell. Truth Ear, a devotion available at level 1 which detects lies, duplicates a 4th level priest spell Detect Lie. Even the mundane Clairvoyance and Clairaudience devotions are 3rd level wizard spells.
At high levels, the meta psionic powers let you do some crazy broken stuff, like make your powers free or permanent, store excess PSP on batteries that you can later use to recharge your mana pool, or partitioning your own mind to operate as two fully functional entities able to use separate powers. They also don't need to worry about magic resistance, which tends to be the bane of high-level spellcasters. They don't need to worry about verbal, somatic, or material components, and are extremely versatile if you picked a variety of different powers. So right now you're probably thinking that they're crazy broken. What are their weaknesses? Well, first of all, they always have to succeed on a power check every single time, and there's always a 5% chance of critical failure. Secondly, they tend to have poor action economy while in combat, with telepathy often taking multiple rounds to activate, and their physical combat prowess isn't anything to get excited about either. And third, while psionics can duplicate some wizard and cleric spells, they cannot ever replace a wizard or a cleric at their main role, which is direct damage and healing.
Wizards are master bombardiers. I mean, who doesn't like Fireball, Chain Lightning, or Meteor Swarm? These nukes hit a large area and their damage increases for free as the wizard levels up. Even a mild 10d6 fireball at level 10 is nothing to scoff at. What can we do with psionics then? The best damage dealing psionic power is the psychokinetic size Detonate, which costs 18 PSP and does a whopping 1d10 damage.
1d10, that's it. The damage doesn't scale as you level up, and you can't pump it up with PSP either. The best you can do is with the meta psionic Devotion Magnify, which is learned at level 6, to double your damage for an extra 50 PSP. That is a total of 68 PSP for 2d10 damage.
At level 6, Ronnie only has 70 PSP, so he can blow his entire load on it. A level 6 wizard's fireball does 66 damage, and they can cast it twice a day, and still have first and second level spells remaining.
Okay, what about clerics? They specialize in curing wounds and other ailments. With psionics, we can cure some diseases, restore a small amount of hit points to others that's quite PSP costly, and we can recover ourselves. But clerics can obviously do way more. As for my final thoughts on the book, I love it. Some rules are a bit vague, like if you use contact and discover the target has psionic defenses, do you have to wait until next turn to start using psionic attacks? The book doesn't say, and a lot of the times the DM have to use your own judgment or interpretation on these rules. I would immediately let the player switch from contact directly into a psionic attack on the same round. As psionic combat is fiddly enough, there's no need to make it worse. And my final thoughts on the psionicist class? I love it. They're extremely versatile, they're extremely unique from a flavor and a mechanical perspective, and while they can do some batshit crazy stuff, they don't overshadow the other classes. And that's something that I love about 2nd edition, because none of the classes are balanced against each other. They all have something unique to contribute, and they're all awesome in their own lane, and none of them can really fully ever replace another class like some of the later D&D editions. So to the ones of you who made it to this part of the video, thank you for watching and sharing in my passion for this underappreciated and overlooked class. The next part of the video, if I ever get to it, will be the psionic expansion in the Dark Sun supplement, The Will and the Way. If you play psionics in 2E, why not tell me about it in the comments? And until next time, hope we get to hang out again in my next video.